Trump drops a bombshell in the Middle East after Jonathan Pollard, former American-Israeli spy, appeared on a podcast talking about Iran, war, and new fronts against Israel. And he ended up letting too much slip right at the moment when Trump is putting pressure on Tehran. The Pentagon warns that it may resume the attack if there is no agreement, and Netanyahu orders an expansion of military control in Gaza. This Saturday, May 30th, 2026. Pollard's statement is not being used as evidence, but rather as a sign that American pressure is pulling off the masks in a region that spent years pretending to be stable, while Iran accumulated power and regional governments tried to fill the vacuum. What does this former American-Israeli spy know, and what did he let slip? Why has Iran become the center of the crisis? How does Trump use this exposure to tighten the noose? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward, no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. Jonathan Pollard said that the storm is coming from the east and stated that Israel needs to prepare for a bigger war after Iran, mentioning Turkey and Egypt as possible next flashpoints. He argued that the Iranian problem needs to be solved first, talked about ending the threats linked to Iran, Gaza, and Lebanon, and made it clear that, in his view, relying only on the hope for peace would be a sign of weakness. The statement carries weight because Pollard is not just any figure. He was connected to American intelligence, was convicted for passing sensitive information to Israel, and today speaks from the hardline wing of Israeli politics, exposing a war mentality that is already circulating behind the scenes in the region. Before any beautiful speeches about peace, the forces in the region are calculating war, borders, influence, and survival. Iran didn't just become a problem now. The Ayatollah's regime has spent years using its nuclear program, its network of armed allies, and its influence over groups like Hamas and Hezbollah to gain power without paying the full price. Trump enters this phase saying that the game has changed. The Pentagon's warning reinforces this change in tone. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated that the United States is ready to resume attacks against Iran if negotiations do not produce an agreement. This statement is not empty rhetoric. It puts the regime before a simple choice: accept a controlled exit or continue betting on threats and take the risk of a new American response. Trump opens the door to negotiation but leaves the handle in Washington's hands. Tehran decides whether that door closes. Israel acts within this same environment of pressure. Netanyahu declared that he intends to expand military control in Gaza, going from about 60 to targeting 70% of the territory. This advance puts pressure on Hamas and provokes an international reaction, but it also shows why the crisis is spreading. Israel no longer believes that Hamas can remain armed, reorganized, and protected by diplomatic rhetoric. The left calls everything Trump's escalation, but ignores that Gaza has become a piece on the Iranian chessboard for years, with armed groups using civilians as a political shield and Israel responding deeper and deeper. Pollard's statement bothered Turkey and Egypt because it touched on two sensitive fronts. Turkey is trying to grow as a regional power, takes a hard line against Israel, and wants to compete for influence in the Islamic world after Iran's weakening. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan accused Israel of trying to create a new enemy after Iran. This reaction reveals a fear of repositioning. If Iran loses ground, Ankara tries to take up part of the stage. But when the regional power raises its tone, Israel also recalculates. The dispute doesn't end, it just moves elsewhere. Egypt comes into play because of Gaza and Sinai. Cairo doesn't want to bring the Palestinian crisis into its own territory, doesn't want to see Hamas reorganized near its border, and doesn't want to be pushed into a decision that could destabilize its internal security. That's why Pollard's statement about Egypt raises alarm. Not because Trump is ordering Israel to attack Egypt, but because everyone knows that any movement in Gaza directly affects the Egyptian border. The issue is military, political, and territorial at the same time. That's when the narrative turns against Trump's opponents. Pollard may even speak with exaggeration, but what he says exposes a truth that the media tries to hide. The policy of weakness did not calm the Middle East. It only gave time for Iran to grow, for Hamas to entrench itself, for Hezbollah to maintain its threat in Lebanon, and for new regional powers to test the limits. Trump didn't create this chaos, he shined a light on it. Trump's logic is pressure with a purpose. It's not war for the sake of war, it's not sentimental rhetoric, it's calculated. Iran needs to feel that enriching uranium, blocking routes, funding armed allies, and threatening Israel has consequences. Israel needs to know it has support, but it also needs to act within a strategy that doesn't hand over the entire region to the radicals. Turkey and Egypt need to realize that Washington is once again watching every move in a way that carries real weight. What happens now depends mainly on Tehran. If the regime accepts a verifiable agreement, Trump can claim a victory through strength without needing to prolong the conflict. If the regime insists on buying time, the threat of new attacks is back on the table. Every move now has a higher cost because the White House stopped pretending that a diplomatic note solves a strategic threat. The bombshell revealed by Pollard also shows an important detail. Israel is already thinking about what comes after Iran. This scares a lot of people, but it also confirms why Trump needs to lead the process with a firm hand. If Washington steps back, local forces start deciding the next steps on their own. If Washington comes in weak, Tehran gains time. If Washington comes in strong, everyone needs to recalculate. That's what's bothering the left. Trump isn't making life comfortable in the Middle East for enemies who got used to tolerance. The former spy's statement revealed what was happening behind the scenes. Iran trying to preserve its nuclear capability, Israel trying to expand its security margin, Turkey trying to project itself, Egypt trying to protect its border, and the United States returning to the center of decision-making. The difference is that with Trump, the threat isn't hidden behind pretty words. Iran wanted to operate in the dark. Now the region enters a testing phase. Tehran needs to decide whether to provide guarantees or court a new confrontation. Israel needs to calculate how far it advances in Gaza without triggering a bigger crisis. Turkey needs to choose whether its reaction will be just words or real action. Egypt needs to secure its border without allowing others to push the problem into Sinai. Trump watches everything with the advantage of someone who understood the rules before everyone else. In the Middle East, those who don't impose a cost end up paying their enemy's bill. I'm Milson Alves, global and internationalist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.